But this memory came in this experience where I woke up as a 5-year-old having a nightmare, got out of my bed, went over to the doorway of my room in the middle of the night, and I sat down. And I looked down the long hallway to my parents' room, and their door was shut. And I told myself in that moment, I didn't go to the room. I was scared. I was terrified from this nightmare. And I told myself in that moment that I couldn't trust my parents. And if I couldn't trust them, I couldn't trust anyone else, including myself.
Hey, it's Rocky. Welcome to Richer Soul. Today's guest is Michael Isom to chat about your human life value and balance sheet. Imagine it's 12 months from now, and you've achieved your major life goals. How does it feel to be in the best shape of your life? To wake up energized, excited about the day, to have great relationships and friends who support you and propel you forward. How does it feel to have an excess of money, to be able to make the choices you want, to be fearless and open to trying new adventures? Imagine being connected to the universe and it providing everything you desire. It's possible over time, and your past does not dictate your future. The only thing holding you back from this vision is you. It's time to take control of our thoughts and use them to our advantage. Welcome to Richer Soul, where we achieve our dreams and bring balance to health, wealth, relationships, time, and spirituality. If you have not had a chance to listen to episodes 1 through 9, I encourage you to go back and listen to the framework behind Richer Soul and how to create the life of your dreams. You can also find all the show notes for this episode at richersoul.com. Today, we're going to chat about your human life value, which is much more important than your financial value. Too often in society, we judge people and success based on their financial worth instead of their human worth. Our real value is in the human worth, and the reason for this podcast is helping you to define what that is for you. Don't let someone else define it. How do you live your ultimate life and stop being distracted by societal noise that takes you down the wrong path? My friend Michael Isom has dedicated his life to empowering conversations around production and protection. He passionately believes that we were living during the most extraordinary time in human history. Entrepreneurs are going to create more wealth for themselves and society over the next decade than we did during the entire 20th century. He built his firm Vault AIS to help you understand and leverage the principles underlying these economic forces at play. He is the co-author of What Would the Rockefellers Do? Michael speaks across the country, inspiring business owners and professionals on the AIS Triangle. It's a unique system to pay less in taxes, safeguard money, and access that money along the way, and earn interest versus paying it, ensuring the money survives from one generation to the next, and simplifying personal finance. Let's meet Michael and learn from him. Welcome to Richer Soul, Michael Isom. It's great to have you join us today.
Thank you, Rocky. Been looking forward to this.
And I'm excited to learn from you today. We always like to start at the beginning. What was it like when you were growing up, and how much did your family and school teach you about money?
Great question. In 7th grade, I started working at the local motorcycle dealership, Cycletown Yamaha. And I was paid $2.25 an hour. I remember that distinctly, sweeping floors, washing bikes. And I loved motorcycles, was very interested in them. But I did that because that's how I paid for things that I wanted. Clothes for school, parts for motorcycles, and of course, dating girls. And I worked at that motorcycle shop from 7th grade through my first year of college. And in my senior year of high school, I paid my mom $100 a month rent just to help out. And so earning money and buying things that I wanted I think that we've taught our kids that. So it certainly was the case for myself, for my wife, and what we've shared with our kids has been the way that we have found to value money and learn the value of money is to be able to earn it ourselves and spend it ourselves. And I believe, frankly, when I'm talking to clients, Rocky, that's the number one thing that they can do with their kids is to allow them to earn a dollar and spend it themselves to truly learn the value of a dollar.
And I agree with you. And we did that with our kids because we knew that one day they're going to be left wealth, and we don't want them to be in a situation where they don't know how to handle it. And we expected them to be successful in their own ways, whatever they choose to do. And so they should also learn to do that and also just not get caught up in all the silliness that everyone else is doing. And so that's a big part of it. And I think that the part people forget is you can't learn to play golf without a golf club. You can't learn money without money in your pocket, right? you
For
have
sure.
you actually have to experience it. And I think too many parents don't let their kids experience it.
100%. Yep. There's no substitute. I talk this strongly with clients that there is no substitute to learning the value of money than earning it and spending it ourselves.
So did you do something specific with your kids to be able to achieve that?
Yeah, we did. We had things around the house that they did just to participate in the home. And then they would then do little odd things like wash car, do extra things over and above, make their bed, clean their room, things like that we felt like were just being part of the family to help out. But they would do extra things and get paid for that at a young age. And then one thing we did when they got into high school, specifically when they turned 16 here in Utah to be able to drive an automobile and they wanted a car, we said to them, and my wife and I came up with this together, that if they maintained a 3.8 GPA or higher and were involved in an extracurricular activity at school, our daughter did cheer, that we would make their car payment for them. Our son did not want to be involved in an extracurricular activity at school, and so he chose to work part-time. So we made his car payment for him. If he kept up a 3.8 GPA and he worked part-time, then we would make that, I think it was like $180, somewhere around there, for their car payment for their vehicle. And that was the exchange. So there had to be, and still to this day, my son helps me in my business. In fact, we were just moving, recording stuff around because he's really good at video and tech and editing and things of that nature. So he was assisting me with sales video, and I pay him. There's an exchange that happens there for that. So yeah, just little gigs around at a young age. And then it's carried up through. And our daughter went to a tech college and she's married now, made us grandparents just less than 2 years ago, which is amazing. And she manages the books for her husband's small business, which is great. Yeah.
So it all worked out well.
It has. Now, of course, there's been this roller coaster, Rocky, having kids and anyone else listening to this with kids. But yeah, at the end of the day, there's no substitute.
What do you see on average with your clients before they talk to you?
I see both. I see those that have already been doing something like this. And then I see many that have not. And so this is a big conversation. First generational wealth. And my wife and I actually butted heads on this quite a bit because she came from a home where her father was a school teacher and her mom stayed at home, and there were 5 kids. So it was a school teacher's salary that she grew up with. So she worked and she did things like that. And she didn't have any extra things growing up. And her mom worked part-time to help provide some of these extra things, the nice dress for school and the prom and different things like that. And she wanted to give more to our kids without that exchange taking place. And so we butted heads on that. But I see that with my clients too. But with what has come from that is a lot of frustration in the end. That's why I'm so strong about there's no substitute for them earning a dollar and spending it themselves.
And we saw that because we're immigrants, and I learned that And I was taught that at a young age that, hey, the first generation works hard, the second generation gets propelled, and then they don't want their kids to suffer. So they hand them everything. And we literally, across the families and generations, you see absolutely spoiled kids because these parents were very wealthy and they did well for themselves. And it just created nothing but a mess. And so that was kind of instilled in me that I wanted to make sure that my kids didn't turn out like that. And so we were very intentional with it as well.
Yeah. And it's not just the money part of it, but it goes even deeper, which I'm sure we'll get into, which is self-worth and their worth as an individual and feeling worthy in their own life. My son and I were just having this conversation again. And yeah, we're very, very intentional about that.
You know, it's kind of funny you mention it, and I didn't think of it that way. But for my kids, they didn't care about the labels on their clothes. And the only way you can not care is to have self-worth, right? But we didn't build the self-worth. We just built the other part of it. And I guess we did build self-worth too, but it wasn't as intentional in focusing on that. It was indirect. Like, you don't need all of this stuff. Look at how much everyone's telling you stories. Now, we also were very intentional in sending them to schools where that was not the norm, meaning you weren't supposed to bring commercial stuff to school. So like, don't bring a lunchbox with cartoon characters, and they had uniforms. So that also makes it easy. But even beyond that, like the accessories and things, like, don't bring all this commercial crap to school. And so I think it kept them away from that. And we were lucky that they didn't have to deal with social media until they were teenagers. And so they missed that whole part of it. And I don't think we would have let them anyway. So not a big deal. But those are the things that kids unfortunately deal with, which at the core is affecting their self-worth.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very real. And our daughter with our grandson, my son-in-law, very intentional about those conversations. It's something that we're very aware of, that we talk about, and we're intentional as a grandparent and then for them as parents in raising their son and any other future grandkids.
So it sounds like life is wonderful for you. I'm assuming it was all just smooth sailing to this point in life, huh?
Oh, that's a big one. Yeah, no, there's been many ups and downs. I call it the build and burn. And I've had two big builds and burns. And the second real big build and burn for me was transformational, and why I'm so passionate about what I do today and how I communicate it and the way I live today.
Would you mind sharing both of them?
Yeah, I'm happy to. So again, I didn't come from money. I worked at the motorcycle shop, and then Rocky, I don't know if you know this, maybe I've shared this with you, I'm not sure, and I didn't write about it in my book, but when I got into college at the age of 22, I was making $8.50 an hour, and I got engaged. So I want to say this again publicly. I've mentioned this a few times. My wife, Wendy, said, yes, I'll marry you when I was making $8.50 an hour in 1993. A couple of months into our engagement, while going to college, I responded to an ad to sell cell phones. And I knew the general manager that was going to open up this new cell phone store in St. George, Utah called Cellular One. So prior to Cellular One in 1993, there was one choice. It was called ComNet Cellular. It was a monopoly. You wanted a cell phone, you had to go to ComNet. Cell One was opening up. She asked me to be a sales rep for them. And I thought, great, I could do this part-time while I'm going to college. My first 30 days, August of 1993, I made $20,000 at the age of 22.
Big money. By the way, I bought phones from Cellular One back in the day.
Did you? Okay. Yeah. So yeah, it was huge money. I hadn't made 20 grand in a year, let alone in 30 days. And I was a W-2 employee. So I remember getting this check, and after taxes, it was $13,500. But even then, $13,500 is huge money. So I kept working at Cellular One from August of 1993 through 1999. And that exposed me to all sorts of things financially. And I made money. We spent a lot of money. We invested in some real estate and convenience store and different things of that nature. And then I got into the financial services industry in 2000 because I wanted to learn about money. And that's where I met Ray, Les, and Garrett Gunderson. And we, within 6 months of meeting with each other and studying together, we formed a company and started marketing together. And one day, Les came to me and said, "Hey, I've got this investment opportunity with Investor Guy. Think you may want to take a look at it." And so I did. I took a look at it. I trusted Les. I did my due diligence and I met with Investor Guy. And I'll say this, and I can say this now. Back then, it's a lot different than the perspective I have today. But Investor Guy, Rocky, promised to pay me 5% a month on my money, hard money lending with real estate. 2004, 2005, 2006. So I give him, I think to myself, I'm going to start with a small shoe and investment of $50,000. And I did. And I started getting $2,500 a month checks. So I'm like, here's another $250,000. I now have $300,000 with Investor Guy. Checks kept coming. So I'm like, here's another $500,000. Now I have $800,000 and the checks kept coming. So then, Rocky, I'm like, I wonder if my client Joe would want to get in on this. And how about Becky, Sam? Next thing I know, over the next few years, we have over $10 million with Investor Guy. And the checks kept coming until August of 2007, no checks. September, no checks. And I'm starting to freak out, like literally breaking out in hives all over my body, stressed to the max. Investor Guy is not taking my phone calls any longer. And I liquidate my personal bank accounts over the next 4 months to pay interest to my clients. And during that time, I get a phone call. And on the other line was an FBI agent. And he says, "We understand you have investment dealings with Investor Guy. We need to talk." And it wasn't too long before I started wearing a wire for the feds to find out where the money went. But it was too late. And I ended up losing over $4.8 million of my family's entire life savings. And millions of dollars of my clients' money completely gone. And there's a book called The Body Keeps the Score. And I went from healthy. I'm 6'3". We've met each other in person, Rocky. I'm around 205 pounds healthy today. But back then I went down to 170 pounds from stress. And I was a complete asshole to everyone around me, including my family. And after a couple of years, I couldn't keep the company together. I shut it all down. The stress was so intense. I was living off a little bit of a savings that we had, and everything else was completely decimated. And more than that was my mindset and my belief and my courage and my confidence. And then it's October 2010, and there's a knock at our front door, and it's my wife's family. It was 6 a.m. in the morning. And I opened the door up. I said, "Hey, it's early. What's going on?" And they're all standing there. And they said, "We're here for Wendy and the kids. They're moving out." 12 hours later, I find myself alone on the bathroom floor, screaming to God, bloody nose, snot streaming all over the place. And I'm hysterical. And I load a bullet in the chamber of a 9mm Ruger P89 pistol and press it up against the roof of my mouth. Rocky, with my finger on the trigger, bullet in the chamber, ready to end my life over my state of mind and everything that led to that point, when I feel a rush come over my body that I'd never felt before. I carefully sit the gun down on the floor, and I commit to God and myself in that moment that I'm going to extract the lessons that led me to that point of putting that gun in my mouth, apply them in my life, and share them with as many people as I possibly can. And that's exactly what I've done. And that's one of the main reasons I'm so passionate about what I'm doing today, why I wrote the book that I did, why I communicate with clients today, what I communicate. And one of the first people that I called was Garrett Gunderson. And he sat down with me, Rocky, and he said, you can choose to leverage your past to create moving forward. And I've been doing that every day since then. And, you say, your life's all roses and everything's beautiful. Life is amazing today, Rocky, because of a whole lot of massive work and commitment. And I'm so glad, and I communicate this to my clients, that I chose to produce my way out of it versus shrink. Because the end of 2007, all of 2008, 2009, and most of 2010, I was a victim and I shrunk, and I was drinking alcohol, and I was a complete asshole. Like I mentioned to everybody around me, I was just cantankerous and just miserable. And life didn't feel like it was worth living. And it's totally different today than it was back then. But it's because of my commitment to extract the lessons and apply them in my life and share them with as many people as I possibly can.
And around that time, there was a whole lot of other people experiencing a whole lot of pain as we went into a recession. And, it's funny, and I don't say this lightly, but we haven't had a recession since.
Yeah.
And, we're coming into springtime. Well, you can't have spring without winter. And so we do need to go through cycles, but, this time around, things are different. I just hope that when winter comes, because it will come, that it is not too brutal, and that I think the good thing is now people are a little bit, well, I shouldn't say that. I'm noticing a lot more people in my life who are more resilient to being able to deal with these types of things.
Yeah.
And it could just be age and wisdom, or I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see what happens as life goes forward.
Yeah. Well, along that line of, people being more resilient and aware and all these different things, I had put my self-worth during that period of time when I lost all that money, and the few years after that, I'd put my self-worth on my property value balance sheet. So when I lost everything financially, right, I didn't come from money. I made this money, got into cell phones, got into the financial services industry, did really well, ended up losing all of that. And my self-worth was tied up in my financial balance sheet. So when that was gone, I wasn't even thinking about this other balance sheet that I now communicate with today, that I've talked with you about, which is called a human life value balance sheet. And there's assets and liabilities on our human life value balance sheet. And one of those assets is relationship capital. I told you I called Garrett Gunderson. My relationship with you, now that we met each other earlier this year, and my clients and my wife and other people, relationship capital is a line item on the human life value balance sheet. So is education, morals, values. You talk about resiliency and wisdom and things of that nature. But there's also some liabilities on there, and those would be limiting mindsets or beliefs. And a commitment for me is to continue to do work on the liability side of my balance sheet. So I'm very intentional today in my writing and things that I do. I love Byron Katie, loving what is and questioning my thoughts. Is it true? And turning it around and pointing the finger at me versus everybody else out there around me, because I did that for years and it didn't work very well for me when I was pointing my finger at others. So I'm very passionate about this human life value balance sheet. I do talk about it to my clients, and it's something that I look at more than my property value balance sheet, but I look at both because human life value is the source and creator of all property value. It takes this first to be able to then go out and create and exchange with others to be able to have items on our property value balance sheet.
And that is so true. I think Byron Katie's book is The Work, correct?
Loving What Is, and her website is thework.com.
Okay. I thought maybe it was at her original book called The Work.
She has several.
She has, because I remember that book, and I think there's 3 or 4 questions to ask to kind of challenge yourself. And that's what she called the the work. Normally I'd ask you what inspired you to write the book. And the book is What We're Worth, Realize Your Human Life Value and Know What You're Really Worth. But it sounds like you've told us what inspired you to write that book. And so,
Yes.
in the book is the story of David, who, in a sense, had a very similar outcome to you in the sense of overconfidence, euphoria, getting involved in cryptocurrency, putting all his money into cryptocurrency, and then literally losing it all overnight. So, there's a million ways to lose money. in also, so was the story kind of to resemble your story? Is that what it came from? Okay.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. David Shallcross is this fictional character in the book that I wrote about. He got bored. He got bored in his current business. He didn't see his current business as his number one investment. And because he got bored and he stopped creating at a high level in his own business, that frankly, Rocky was providing all the cash flow for him that allowed him to invest in crypto in the first place. And I want to make sure I'm clear about this. I'm not against crypto. I'm against someone investing and taking risk in an area where they don't have control, knowledge, experience, or expertise, let alone purpose or passion. So I'm for investing. I'm against gambling. And David got bored in his business and he started gambling with his cash. He didn't see it as gambling. I didn't see it as gambling when I lost all that money, but he ended up losing it and almost lost his family and almost took his life over it. And same for me.
And those are tough lessons to learn. I always say, you can learn lessons yourself or you can learn them from others. Me, I'm a little lazy. I'd rather learn them from somebody else. Right. But as part of that is kind of what David had. And it's the fear of missing out. And, even today you look at markets, it's like the fear of missing out. Oh my, and this and that, and this is doing this and that's doing that. And it's not easy. And the second thing, it's funny because when you were talking, I was like, when I left my corporate job and I started doing my own thing, I started to realize how much value I had that I didn't know, because in corporate, they really stifle your human life value. They really push it down. And I'm starting to realize how bad it was.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, but I'm also, it gave me a lot of other things, most of which was freedom, which I never want to go back and change the way I got here, because this is what got me to today. And I'm okay with that, and plenty of lessons, and I'm happy. So let's kind of look at this human life value balance sheet a little deeper.
Yeah.
The one side, when you have a balance sheet, right? I'm a finance guy. One side's assets, one side's liabilities. And then at the bottom of it on that one corner is the difference between the two. And that's truly what your net worth is, right? Assets minus liabilities. And again, you come up with your net worth. It's easy with money. Well, it is easy with money. I think a lot of people don't realize what liabilities are. Maybe they know what assets are. And we've talked about this on previous episodes. We can argue about whether your house is an asset or not.
Sure.
In the sense that assets should continue to bring revenue and provide value. That's why I struggle with crypto, because in and of itself, it's like if I have a dollar bill and I hold a dollar bill, it doesn't produce any value, nor does a Bitcoin or whatever. I'm hoping somebody's going to pay me more for it in whatever the exchange is. And so that to me is what we call gambling. That's, it's all okay. So what do you consider to be human life assets?
Yeah. Knowledge, experiences, relationships, education, morals, values, anything that can increase our mental capital in our life. It could be personal enjoyment, our perspective. Perspective determines action. I think that's a really big one. I work on my perspective often, and our perspective could be an asset on our human life value balance sheet, or it could be a liability depending on where we are at mentally. So I wake up daily and I do work. I write in a gratitude journal. I learned this early on, 2002. I'm in strategic coach. That was a life send for. I have a cassette in this cabinet in the back of my room here. Rocky, I have a cassette that's a Positive Focus from Dan Sullivan from 2002. He then put it on a DVD or a CD, and now it's all, of course, all digital and stuff now. But Positive Focus, I wrote pen and paper through those years. That helped keep me alive. And I continued that to this day, where I write what I celebrate and appreciate. So that's an asset for me. My morning routines are an asset for me on my human life value balance sheet. Having conversations, committing to be a lifelong learner. Lots of different things are assets on a human life value balance sheet.
And so then let's look at the other side. What are the liabilities?
Yeah, limiting beliefs, perspective, things for me. And I believe it's all personal. I believe that things are either working or not working for someone. They're either moving me closer to happiness or further away in my life. And so I would challenge anyone listening to this just to be active in thinking about assets and liabilities on their human life value balance sheet. And are there things that aren't working? Are there limiting beliefs? Are there stories? Stories are a big one. Talking about Byron Katie, questioning our thoughts, scarcity mindset of just all this negativity. I'm selling an RV right now, Rocky. And prior to our call a couple of hours ago, I had a gentleman stop by and arranged a time to come by and look at it. And he just negative this and that and just all these negative things. I was like, just like internally, I'm like, man, just all this negativity. So negativity is a liability, I believe, on a human life value balance sheet.
Today's episode is sponsored by Profit Answer Man Podcast. Did you know that most small business owners hate looking at their financials? It's one reason they may struggle with business success. The Profit Answer Man podcast helps them ensure they are profitable and can pay their employees and weather the storms we all have to face. It's built on the Profit First methodology of pay yourself first. The Profit Answer Man podcast is a must listen to for every small business owner and anyone who wants to help them survive and thrive. Check it out on your favorite listening platform.
How about yourself? What do you see as liabilities on the human life value balance sheet?
I think it is all that kind of, it's the mental, it could be the bad relationships. I would call it, I don't know what's the opposite of grit. Like, is it alcoholism? Is it inability to get stuff done?
Guilt.
Shame, guilt, blame. I think blame is probably a big one. Anger.
Victim mentality,
all of that stuff. So do you put numbers to this? Like, because how do you really know?
Yeah,
is this worth
I
more
haven't
than
put
that,
numbers
or is that
to
less,
it. Yeah.
How do you, and honestly, for me, what I would think of is to at least stack rank it, to say, what are the things that are my biggest positives to me? Because mine and yours, we might have the same list, but we might order it differently. And then looking at the other side and say, well, what are my biggest negatives? And then the question comes, how do I let go of them? Which is how we met. Because I was at an event learning how to let go of things that no longer served me.
Yeah, definitely. Man, there's so many ways to do that. And that's so I got back into I got out of the financial services industry when I shut my business down the end of 2007, beginning of 2008, 2009, early 2010. I wasn't working. I wasn't producing, and I just was a victim and shrunk. And it was just, rough for over a couple of years. And when I got it back into the financial services industry, I just put my head down, right, the old proverbial nose to the grindstone, and I told myself I'm going to produce my way out of this, and it worked. Thank God I was able to do that and create and exchange with others and share this perspective of number one asset, number one investment, number one strategy, and the things that I write about and what we're worth. And it started working, but then there was something missing. 2020 COVID, 2021, something was missing. And I'm like, what's missing? And that was me going even further deep within myself on the spiritual side of my life, even deeper, to discover and do even more work on that human life value balance sheet, specifically the liabilities and the limiting beliefs. And so I started going back way into my childhood and trauma work and different things of that nature. And it's been really empowering for me to do that, tune-ups and there were some overhauls that happened. Like we tore the engine out and did a complete overhaul and then put it back in and things of that nature. But yeah, just tune-ups along the way. Definitely.
And I think this is what people don't realize. Every time I read a psychology book, and I say this all the time, psychology books are parenting books because they're all about how your parents screwed you up, right? Everyone's got parent screw up stories. And the question is, how much are you still holding on to? And it could be school, it could be a million other things, and not necessarily parents, but it's the childhood things that occurred at those young ages that dramatically affect you today. And the first thing is, are you even aware of it?
Yeah.
Right. And I talk a lot about like that whole first question that I asked you about. It's to learn people's money stories, because those money scripts and those money stories have massive power on how people view their money. And then I started to realize, it's not just money. It's everything else that you talk about on that human life value sheet. Every one of those can have a certain amount of story to it. So, they in education, they say girls aren't doing well with math because they're told girls can't do math, right? And so is that holding you back? Can girls not do math? I don't believe it. But there's a story there, or maybe some teacher told you a story. And that story could be positive or negative, because there's a lot of people who are in very good jobs going, how the hell did I get here? This is not the life I wanted. I don't love this. And even though I make a lot of money, I'm not happy. And it's because they're holding on to all of these different things.
I'll share a very specific experience. And it was actually, it was 3 years ago this month. I was introduced to plant-based medicine work. And I did my very first experience was called somatic body release. You ever heard of somatic body release, Rocky?
I have heard the terms, but I know there's so many different ways to interpret it.
Yeah. Well, this one for me, you can use it plant-based, assisted or not. You can do it without medicine. And the medicine was cannabis, marijuana. And I traveled to participate in this and had a therapist working with me that sat with me. And I laid on this table, and with a small amount of cannabis, I put an eye fold on and I laid there, and my job was to lay there still. And if any part of my body started, how you're laying there in bed sometimes, rocking like your foot, like, I need to move my foot. Something needs to be itched or something like that. And then so you reach down, you itch it, or you move your foot. Well, this happens while you're laying there on this table, like a massage table. You're clothed and things of that nature, but you're laying there and all of a sudden you feel your foot that you need to itch it or move it. And they say, don't move it. Don't move it. Let that intensify. Let that feeling of irritation intensify. And this is somatic body release. And you can do it with or without medicine. And I did it 3 or 4 different times. And this person that I went to, that I traveled to, they work a lot with military veterans that have PTSD. And for me, in that very first experience, it intensified so much for me. And as it intensified, they had me explain what I was feeling. Oh, it's irritating. Okay, great. Focus on irritation and now I really need to move it. And it's frustrating. Great. Focus on it being frustrating. And then that would just intensify. And all of a sudden my body without trying would just start tightening up, and that would intensify. And it would get to a point where I found myself as a 5-year-old boy. I could see myself as a 5-year-old boy waking up from a nightmare. And I have very few memories of my childhood at a young age. But this memory came in this experience where I woke up as a 5-year-old having a nightmare, got out of my bed, went over to the doorway of my room in the middle of the night, and I sat down. And I looked down the long hallway to my parents' room, and their door was shut. And I told myself in that moment, I didn't go to the room. I was scared. I was terrified from this nightmare. And I told myself in that moment that I couldn't trust my parents. And if I couldn't trust them, I couldn't trust anyone else, including myself. So that became my story as a 5-year-old boy. I then validated that story throughout my lifetime, finding others that I couldn't trust, including Investor Guy.
I was going to say, there's a big guy.
So I believe some of that work, and it is work. It's not easy. It was extremely painful. It was my commitment to go deeper on myself. For anyone called to doing work at a deeper level, there's all sorts of things out there that they can do to work on their liabilities, their limiting beliefs on their human life value balance sheet, and go deeper and turn that around and raise their awareness and change their perspective. Because again, I truly believe that perspective determines action. And my perspective in that one example is I don't trust myself. And I can't trust anybody else. And so to be able to have that realization, to be able to do work on that. And frankly, Rocky, it was a point of my marriage being up and down over all these years, because my wife is and has always been someone that I could trust. And she's always been there for me. And I didn't see her as that until just a few years ago. And I'm so glad that I do now see that. I'm so glad that I see that in myself, because my personal enjoyments in the spiritual side of my life is greater than it ever has been. And I witnessed the birth of our grandson just less than 2 years ago. And it's incredible. And I have these conversations, Rocky, just like this with my clients. And I'm in the financial services industry, but I'm having the depth of these conversations with them. And they're buying a lot of that from me indirectly in our conversations.
Are they open to it? I know some people are very open to it, and a lot of other people seem very scared to go there. Because I do something very simple for my clients. We just create a life plan. And it's nothing more than sitting down and figuring out, what do you want from your life? And yet there are a lot of people who are just afraid to do that. And that's just a fraction of what you're talking about.
Yeah. So powerful. So powerful. Yeah, you're exactly right. Some clients don't want to talk about that. Some do. My clients that I connect with at a deeper level want to have those conversations. And I love asking that question too. What do you want? What do you really want? Why do you want it? My wife and I went through Lifebook. Have you heard of Lifebook, Rocky?
I am familiar with Lifebook. I think what Lifebook does is very similar to what I was referring to, just a same concept, different system, which is perfectly fine. You find the one that works for you.
Yeah. Yep. So that's so powerful. And I think it's ever evolving too. In my life, as I evolve as a human, and I'm so glad that my wife and I are on the same page, but we have those conversations often. What do we want? Why do we want it? And when we have that clarity, and these medicine experiences that I've done have assisted me in gaining that clarity of what I really want and why I want it in my life. And then any limiting beliefs that have been in the way of not allowing me to get that, or like you're saying, Rocky, not even allowing me to even have that conversation to dream again.
Yeah. And again, those are all what you talk about in the sense of limiting beliefs, right?
Yeah.
And holding people back and so forth. And you have to address them. And you know, it's funny because I've been having a lot of coaching this year, and I'm shocked at times how easy it is to let go.
Mm.
You know, and it's funny, I actually had a gentleman on the podcast years ago. It's been a while, and he talked about, it was called the Sedona method.
Mm.
And he was just like this. He said, pick up a pen, and he said, turn it over. Now let go. He goes, that's all there is to it. That problem is not you. Just let go. And then the question is, will you let go? And, or can you let go? Will you let go? When?
Mm.
And I was shocked at how many people just kind of just literally break down from that. And it's kind of funny. It's not funny, but it's just amazing how that just little bit makes such a big difference.
So powerful. So powerful. It really is. And I've gained so much personal fulfillment and increase in my human life value in my life over the last 3 years doing exactly what you're talking about.
And we've had people come on, and actually the more and more books that I read, I'm going to say, I don't know, higher level is the right word, but that are at a deeper level. They all have this theory of you don't need anything else. You just need to let go. It's all subtraction. It's not anything more, which means we all have within us what we need. You just need to let go of everything that isn't serving you, so to speak. Isn't that what the statue of David is like? How did you make this? Well, I didn't make David. I just took away everything that wasn't David, right?
100%.
And I think even for us is just realizing that it's more about letting go of all the story, again, back to all the stories we've told ourselves of the 5-year-old boy saying, I can't trust, and being aware of that. But now let me ask you a question. Did you know that story was there before all that? No,
not until that point 3 years ago this month when I discovered that. I had no idea. It was monumental in my life.
And I think that's the key, is unlocking that subconscious door and seeing what's there and going, oh, wow. No wonder. Now it's time to let go.
Yeah. It's exactly right. And I love that analogy of just letting go. And it can be that simple. It doesn't need to be anything greater than that. It really doesn't. Yeah.
No, is a matter. Yeah. A lot of the, I'll call them techniques, modalities, things that I'm seeing
Sure.
are that simple. And going back to Byron Katie, it's 4 questions, right? That's it. It's not this big thing. And you know, it's funny because that comes back to, I have noticed that people don't like simple solutions. Okay. Building wealth is pretty simple. All right. Spend less than you make, automate your savings, invest semi-wisely, and you'll become wealthy. That's it. And yet that's not going to work. We need to go find some fancy way to do this. People just it's that simplicity of everything.
Yeah, I
agree. And learning to kind of do that.
Yeah. And as you were saying that, Rocky, I'm thinking about what you said earlier on about learning from other people so you don't have to experience it yourself. And it's so true. And so I would invite everyone to test it, find out for themselves, test that. If what you're doing is working, great, keep doing that. If it's not working, test this, find out. Yeah, definitely.
Are there other values or lessons that were in the book that we didn't get a chance to share yet? Or maybe in your life in general?
Yeah. One that I'm thinking about, we may have touched on it a little bit. And I talked about, investing and gambling, but what's coming to my mind, and I mentioned this in the book and credit Tony Robbins. In 2016, my wife and I, both of our kids, my assistant, Lacey, we went to UPW and Unleash the Power Within in Dallas, Texas. 8,000 of us, Rocky, in this room, 8,000 people. And Tony Robbins had all 8,000 jumping up and down until 1:00 in the morning. The energy was incredible. But he taught me the 4 basic needs of every human individual. The 4 basic needs is certainty, uncertainty, significance, and love. We will fulfill these needs in our life in one way or another. Uncertainty is variety and risk. And so being aware of that, I wasn't aware of that prior. I wasn't thinking about that, having variety and risk and being deliberate about it in my life. And so I talk to my clients today about being deliberate about having this variety and risk in their life, but where do they take it? And if we were to think about it, and all the listeners, I would have you ask yourselves, where's all the cash come from in your life that's come into your life? And I bet 90%, if not all of them, would say, if they're aware of it, it's come from their ability to produce in their area of expertise, their own business or their own career. Would you agree, Rocky?
Yes. Unless they, won the lottery or their parents were really rich and spoiled them.
Okay. But for the rest of us, the money that's come into our life has come from our ability to produce in our area of expertise. So for me, what I share, and I'm now clear about it today, the life lessons, is that my number one investment has 2 main characteristics: control and human life value. That's my business. That's my career. My ability to produce in my area of expertise at the highest level is what has and will continue to put the most amount of cash in my pocket. And so if I get bored in that, that's a big blinking red light for me now. Maybe I need to go do some medicine work. Maybe I need to go to a Tony Robbins event. Maybe I need to go through the work or have a conversation with you, Rocky, or go through some experience or exercise to remind me and get me excited or passionate again. That's why I'm committed to being a lifelong learner. So I'm fulfilled. So I'm clear about this in my life and I can create the most for those around me. So the career that you're in, the business that you own and operate, in my mind, is where we ought to take risks. So again, I'm not against crypto. I'm not against real estate or anything else like that, if that is an area of expertise for someone. But if it's not, I believe it's a gamble. And so I want to make sure that my clients and all the listeners are clear about that in their own life.
I don't think business needs to be risky. I think a lot of people start risky businesses, but business doesn't need to be risky. And if you sit down and you do the math of the business, you pretty much know whether it's going to work or not work. And I think that's where the business risk comes from, is that nobody sat down and did the math that said, this business model is not going to work. The math says it. So it wasn't risky. It was just not smart. And so then you have to change the value proposition of the business to then make it profitable. And when you do that, it is all fine. So are you familiar with the Savannah Bananas?
No.
Have you heard of them?
No.
Yeah, you should be. You know why? Number 1 most profitable baseball team in America. Now, profit as a percentage of revenue. So they're not the highest revenue. So they're percentage of revenue. When Jesse Cole started the business, he sat down and he did the math, because of profit first. And the math on the back of a napkin, that's how difficult this math was, said your business is going to lose money. And so he said, I need to do something different. And he never stopped doing something different. And because of that, he has literally created an entertainment empire. Because I'll be honest, baseball is very, very boring to me, but watching the Bananas is fun, right? It is. He has literally figured out how to create entertainment without spending money on the entertainers. And so that's how he becomes highly profitable. I was with Tony too, and I think it was 2016. I was in wonderful Newark, New Jersey. I thought he just picked bad locations to give you that uncertainty and fear. Maybe not. Sounds like you were in a better location.
That's funny.
And it was funny because he talked about, and he talks about 6 human needs, and the first 4 were what you talked about, and I'm going to repeat them: certainty, uncertainty, significance, and love. And the problem with significance is ego driven, right? It's, I have a fancy car, a fancy house, a fancy this. And the other 2 were growth and contribution.
That he calls those other 2 the higher spiritual needs.
He does. And he asked the audience, and I think there were 14,000 in ours, how many of you were in this certainty, uncertainty, significance bucket? And how many of you are trying to get into the growth and contribution bucket? And literally every hand was there saying, I'm trying to get out of this and get into that. And it's funny because he talks about how a thief is driven by these. He's like, a thief's got a gun and he's got a certainty that he's going to get some money, but there's still the uncertainty of the robbery. And he's got significance now because he's got power, because he's got the gun against anyone. And he's like, that person's driven by those human needs. It may not be good or bad, right? But it's still how that's being driven. And until you can change your order or change the meaning that goes with them, you can't let go of it.
Yeah,
so
I love that.
You kind of have to do that.
Yeah, I love that. And I love talking about the 2 higher spiritual needs. So as I said, 3 years ago, something was missing, and it was because of the growth and contribution that was missing from my life. And I now get significance from growing myself and contributing to other people's lives.
The only thing that I was disappointed at with Tony, I wasn't disappointed at Tony. I was disappointed that out of the 14,000 people who went, less than 1% took action upon leaving. I'm like, would you people just go do something?
Yeah.
But that is also the catalyst behind the podcast. It's Richer Soul. It's because the money isn't going to make you happy. How do you find that connection with your true wants, needs in life? And when you bring them together, life is pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And I love that way that you define that and talk about that. So with number 1, investment, having control and human life value. And I specifically say knowledge, experience, expertise, and control. And we can make money short term, but for it to be long term, there must then also be purpose and passion with it for us to be able to sustain it. And that's the growth and contribution also.
Remind me, did you talk about Ikigai in the book or no?
About what?
Are you familiar with the term Ikigai?
No. I'm familiar with it, but I did not talk about it in the book.
Okay. So you are familiar with it though. Okay. I mean, that is what it is. It's purpose, meaning, what you're passionate about, what you're good at, and it's okay to make money doing what you're good at. 100%. Right? It sometimes it feels like you're stealing because you're having so much fun. It's like, people pay me for this? Wow, that's cool.
Isn't that great?
It is wonderful.
Yeah.
It's time to learn the secrets of life. What's your secret to living an abundant life?
Producing more than I consume.
It's funny. I heard a story and I think it was out of Britain, but it was basically, a man who makes $1 and spends $1 is not in a happy place. And a man who makes $1 and spends 99 cents is happy and thrilled. You have to keep margin, right?
I want to also add to that. My wife and I were just talking about this on our walk last night, making our future bigger than our past. And Dan Sullivan is ringing in my head as I'm saying that. because he talks about that. But that's also another big one for me.
There's a topic we haven't really talked about. And maybe I will get somebody on. I'm working on longevity.
Yeah.
And I know Dan Sullivan's so I did not use his systems, but I just went and had a whole full body MRI and all these tests done to make sure that everything is thumbs up. What did you learn later in life that you wish you would have learned sooner?
The trusting myself and others, mainly trusting myself.
That's big.
Yeah. It's been huge for me, Rocky.
If you were to give an 18-year-old one specific piece of wisdom, what would it be?
The first thing I thought of is trust yourself. But the other, an 18-year-old, I'm thinking of our son. And I would want an 18-year-old to gain experience, to go out and test things and gain experience. And I love that Gary Vee talks so much to people about, oh, you're so young. You're only 28 or you're only 32 years old. You're so young. Like you have all this time. So go out and experience things and find your area of expertise through experiences.
It's funny though. He was on the other day ranting about get off your parents' payroll.
For sure. Get off your parents' payroll. Yeah. Yeah.
If people would like to learn more about you in the book, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah. Thanks, Rocky. And thanks for having me on. This has been a lot of fun for me. Vault AIS is my website /books. And I'd love to give all of your listeners a free copy of my book, What We're Worth. It's $9.95. Just pay the shipping and handling of $9.95 and we'll send you a copy of What We're Worth. So vaultais.com and then specifically /books for that offer. But anything on our website will guide them.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
You're welcome, Rocky. It's been my pleasure. Thank you.
Have you ever thought about your human life value and all the intangibles that you have that are worth so much more than money? Do you value these? Do you pay attention to them? Do you nurture them? Are they a priority? Or are you just handing it away for pennies, chasing a couple of dollars, only to realize it didn't work out? Too often it's too late when we learn these lessons. They surely aren't taught in school. And then we can't get back that lost time. I encourage you to take the time to create your personal value balance sheet and decide where do you want to improve it. We've got plenty of episodes to show you how. By the way, do you know someone else who might need to increase or improve their human life value? Would you do me a favor? Would you share the episode with them? I think they'll thank you for it. I know I will. Thank you. Next week, we're going to continue along these themes with Anand Damani to talk about living a resolved life. Thanks for listening. Have an abundant week.